My name is Cole Haston, and I have been a trail ranger in Yellowstone National Park for 8 years. I want to be clear about what my job is before I tell you what I have seen, because when you say something strange, people look for the simple explanation first. My job is trail watching, visitor safety, and wildlife observation along a stretch of backcountry trails in the Southern District. I walk the same paths over and over. I know these trails the way you know a room you have lived in for years. Every route across the path, every place where the trail gets narrow, every spot where the ground goes soft after rain. When something is different, I notice it. That is not a gift. That is just what years of walking the same ground produces in a person. The trail I am going to talk about is called the Thermal Ridge Trail in the park's internal records. It runs 11 miles through forest and thermal ground, crossing 2 small creeks and passing the edge of a small geyser basin before ending at a backcountry campsite that gets maybe 40 visitors in a good summer season. It is not a famous trail. It does not show up in the big park brochures. Serious hikers find it through the detailed guides, and they come for the quiet and the steam rising off the ground and the feeling of being genuinely away from the paved paths and the visitor centers. I have walked the Thermal Ridge Trail more times than I can count. I know every person who signs up for it because the backcountry permit system requires registration, and I handle the permits for my district. I know how many people go in. I know how many come out. Those numbers have always matched, with one exception that I am going to describe as carefully and as honestly as I can. The exception is this: sometimes the number of people who come out of that trail is higher than the number who went in. Not by a lot, never a crowd. Once it was 1 extra person, once it was 2. The first time it happened, I assumed I had made a counting error or that a day hiker had connected from another trail without going through the permit system. Both of those things were possible. I noted it in my log and moved on. The second time it happened, I paid closer attention. It was a Tuesday in late September. A group of 4 had gone in 2 days earlier. A family, father, mother, 2 teenage sons, all registered, all with proper gear, all experienced hikers according to the questionnaire we have people fill out with their permit applications. I had checked them in myself at the trailhead. 4 people with 4 packs going into 4 miles of forest before the thermal ground opened up. They came out on the 3rd morning as scheduled. I was at the trailhead waiting, the way I always wait at the end of a registered trip, partly for safety and partly because I like to hear how people found the trail. 5 people walked out, the family of 4, and behind them, a man I had not seen go in. He was tall, maybe in his late 40s, wearing gear that looked right, but not quite the way experienced gear looks after 2 nights in the backcountry. No trail dust on his boots. Pack sitting a little too clean on his shoulders. He was walking at the back of the group, and he was not talking to any of them, just walking with them, the way you walk with strangers who happen to be going the same direction. I stopped the group at the trailhead and did my standard checkout. I asked the father how the trip went. He said excellent, good weather, saw a bison herd on the 2nd morning, campsite was in good shape, normal exit conversation. I asked if they had met anyone out on the trail. He said no, they had the whole thing to themselves both days. I looked past him at the 5th person. The man was standing at the edge of the parking lot, looking out at the tree line. Not at me, not at the family, just at the trees. I excused myself from the family and walked over to him. I introduced myself and asked for his permit. He turned and looked at me, and he was completely ordinary looking. Brown hair going gray, calm face. Nothing about him that would make you look twice on a street. He said he did not have a permit. He said he had come in from the North Connector Trail and had not realized this trailhead required registration. He was apologetic and relaxed about it in equal measure. He gave me a name. He gave me a town in Wyoming he said he was from. He answered every question I asked him in the easy way of someone who has nothing to hide and nothing to prove. I wrote down what he told me and let him go, because I had no reason to hold him and no authority to do anything more than document the permit violation. That evening, I ran the name and town he gave me. Nothing came back that matched. The name was common enough that the absence of a match meant very little. The town existed. I could not confirm he lived there. I told myself he was a hiker who had bent the rules and gotten a little turned around and walked out the wrong trailhead. It happens. People enter from one point and exit from another, and the permit system has gaps. I told myself this for about 2 weeks. Then I pulled my logs from the previous 3 years and went looking for other instances where my exit count did not match my entry count. I found six times in 3 years where more people came out of that trail than went in. Always the same trail, always 1 or 2 extra, always at the back of a registered group, always in the fall season, September or October, never summer, never winter. I sat with those 6 entries for a long time. Then I started asking the rangers who had worked this district before me. Not officially, just conversations, the way you have conversations when you want real information instead of official information. I tracked down 2 former rangers through Park Service contacts. I called them both. The first one listened to what I described and was quiet for a moment and then said, "How many times?" I told him 6 in 3 years. He said that in his 4 years on the same trail, he had logged 9. He had reported the first 3 up the chain and been told it was likely hiker confusion around the permit system and to keep documenting but not to escalate further. After that, he stopped reporting it up and just kept his own record. I asked him what he thought it was. He said he did not know. He said the extra people always behaved the same way, calm, cooperative when approached, answers that were complete enough to satisfy in the moment and impossible to verify afterward. He said none of them had ever done anything threatening or even unusual beyond the fact of their presence. They just walked out of a trail they had not walked into once and were never seen again. He said the thing that stayed with him was not any single incident, but the pattern. Always that trail, always fall, always at the back of a group, never alone, never at the front. As though whatever was producing them understood that the back of a group was the place least likely to be noticed until it was too late to ask the right questions at the right time. I asked him if he had ever gone looking, gone into the trail specifically trying to find the origin point, the place where the extra person joined the group. He said yes. Once, in his last season, he had gone in 2 days ahead of a registered group and set up an observation point near the midpoint of the trail, where the thermal ground opened up and the tree cover thinned, and you could see a long way in good light. He had his log and his camera and a full week's supplies. He was going to watch every inch of that trail until the registered group passed through, and he was going to see exactly where the extra person came from. The registered group passed through on the second day. 3 hikers, all registered, all accounted for. They passed his observation point and continued north toward the campsite. No extra person with them. He broke down his position and hiked out. When he reached the trailhead, the registered group was already there, finishing their exit check with the duty ranger. 4 people. They had gone in as 3. He had watched them pass his position as 3. There was a 7-mile stretch of trail between his observation point and the trailhead where he had not had eyes on the group. Whatever joined them had done it in those 7 miles. He left the district the following spring. He told me he did not leave because of the trail. He told me he left because after 4 years of documenting something he could not explain and could not stop and could not get anyone above him to take seriously. He was tired in a way that a new posting could fix, and staying could not. I understood that. I am in my 8th year. I have not left yet. I tell myself it is because the work matters, and the district needs continuity, and all the other things you tell yourself, when the real answer is more complicated. The real answer is that I am still trying to understand it. Still walking that trail in the off-season when no groups are registered. Still watching the point where the thermal ground opens up and the tree cover thins. Still looking for the place where the path offers something up that did not begin there. I have not seen it happen directly. Not yet. I have only ever seen the result of it. A calm face at the back of a group, boots without trail dust, a pack sitting too clean, a name that goes nowhere when you run it. Last October, I was doing an end-of-season sweep of the trail, collecting flagging tape and checking the condition of the creek crossings before the winter closed things down. I was about 6 miles in, just where the thermal ground begins, just where the steam starts coming up through the grass in thin white threads, and the smell of sulfur comes in on the air. I found boot prints in the soft ground near the first creek crossing. Fresh prints, maybe a few hours old. Single person, average size, heading north toward the campsite. No group was registered on the trail that week. No permit had been issued. The trailhead register had no entries for the past 4 days. I followed the prints for about half a mile. They stayed consistent, steady pace, no stumbling, no deviation from the center of the path. Then they stopped. Not at a rock where the ground hardened and prints would not show. Not at the creek where water would erase them. In the middle of a soft, muddy stretch of path where prints should have continued and did not. One step, then nothing. I stood there for a long time, looking at the last print and the unmarked ground beyond it. The steam came up through the grass around me. The sulfur smell sat on the still air. The trail ran north through the thinning trees toward the campsite and the thermal basin and the long, quiet miles of backcountry beyond. I took a photograph of the last print. I wrote the location and the time in my log. I turned around and walked back to the trailhead. I filed my end-of-season report that evening. Trail in good condition. Creek crossings stable. No visitor issues to report. I have the photograph of the last boot print on my phone. I look at it sometimes when I am trying to decide whether what I do on this trail matters, whether the watching and the counting and the careful logging of things I cannot explain adds up to anything useful, or whether it is just the habit of a person who needs something to hold on to in the absence of answers. I do not know what walks out of that trail at the back of registered groups in the fall. I do not know what left those boot prints in the mud and then simply stopped leaving them. I do not know what the thermal ground at the midpoint of that trail has to do with any of it, or whether the connection is real or just the pattern that a watching mind imposes on things that are actually separate. What I know is that more people come out of that trail than go in. 6 times in my 8 years. 9 times in my predecessor's 4 years before that. Calm faces, clean boots, names that go nowhere. And every fall, when the season winds down and the registered groups thin out and the trail gets quiet, I walk it alone and I count carefully, and I watch the back of every group I pass, and I note in my log everything I see. Everything I see. And some of what I see, I still do not have words for.